So this week we are going to be talking about genocide in the week 8 of remote learning. So this section of notes is by Mrs. Beck, and I added some things in here too. So let's do it. So genocide, the word genocide, comes from geno, which means race, and side, which means to kill. And genocide actually, the phrase, the word, was coined during the midst of the Holocaust. So the word genocide did not exist in the language. Obviously, the root and the N word did, but genocide, the actual terminology genocide, does not exist until the middle of the Holocaust. However, actions of genocide have existed forever. So Raphael Lemkin, he is the person that coined the term genocide. And he was a Polish lawyer who fled from Poland in 1939 to escape the Nazis. And personally, he lost nearly 50 members of his own family. After World War II, Lemkin spoke out to the international community to create laws outlawing future genocides after he had seen not only what it had done to his family, but to the people of Poland. So this is like a really powerful speech. So, like I said, genocide themselves actually predate this term, and the Holocaust is not the very first genocide that's ever happened in history. However, if we look back, it is incredibly devastating, but it also, the actual Holocaust itself, helped change international thinking about genocide and genocide interventions. In 1949, the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide defined genocide as acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. So there are targeted parts toward genocide. It's not just killing of anyone, it has to be specific of a certain national um, boundary and ethnic affiliation, racial group, or religious group. So going on to look further at the definition, it says, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in or whole part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So it's not specifically just killing, but destroying the way of life of people. In 1996, genocide was broken down into 8 stages. By examining and looking at what happens during genocides, this order and organization was born. Gregory H. Stanton, president of the Genocide Watch, is the one who established this. So it says that all genocides, oops, we'll do that later, are not the same, but typically follow this order of classification, symbolization, dehumanization, organization, polarization, preparation, extermination, and denial. So we're going to look more closely at each one of those stages. It is noted that each stage there's an opportunity for the genocide to be stopped. So, in certain regards to different theories about how things occur in history, there are like the Korean Britain theory on revolutions. It's sometimes what you think about as an event happening is it's inevitable. Once this begins, it can't be stopped. The ball is rolling down the hill and there's nothing to get in front of it. But Dr. Stanton said that at any point, if you recognize any of these things happening from a human rights perspective, there is interventions that can be taken to ensure that the genocide doesn't continue. However, later stages, if you're looking at genocide, just because stage 1 has passed doesn't mean that stage 1 is done and that that's not happening anymore. So typically earlier stages are required in order for it to develop to a genocide. However, all stages are implemented throughout once they have been passed. So let's take a closer look at the different stages. Stage number 1 is classification. So In this classification stage, you have to basically pit two groups against each other, us versus them, utilizing that ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality to create this bipolar society. So you'd say, in Germany under Hitler, it's the Germans versus the Jews. In Rwanda, it's the Hutu versus the Tutsi. So the whole idea is to break down society by creating an enemy within that grouping. So also throughout the 8 stages of genocide, there are different preventative measures, like we just talked about, that appear. So, like, how do we avoid this? So, like, common ground is really important. So, classification is identifying who versus who. Symbolization. So, symbolization is giving a name or symbol to classify that group as being different. So, you give a nickname, you like take away the name that is what's more traditional and acceptable, politically correct from that group, and then apply a different name to them, such as Jews or Gypsies. You maybe have classification to distinguish them by colors or dress, tattoos. If you think about it during the Holocaust, that would be the yellow star for Jews under Nazi rule, or the blue scarf for the people from Eastern Kill Zone in Cambodia. So symbols nowadays, once the genocide is over, are considered to be hate speech. Well, even during the genocide, they are considered to be hate speech and are often outlawed. And symbolized names are considered racist speech because, again, it's used in a derogatory manner by a group that is trying to destroy them, to overtake power. The third stage is dehumanization. This is where one group denies humanity to the other group. So they are equated to animals, vermin, insects, diseases. This is where we have like propaganda be ramped up, hate speech on radios to vilify the group. So in the symbolization stage, we have that name calling. Well, now you're taking it one extra layer of horrible, and you're applying dehumanize, maybe claiming that people are dirty. You start blaming them. This is where we see the propaganda posters with certain groups looked really over caricatured, and those racist images start to appear. So dehumanization is about utilizing propaganda, print, and hate radio to victimize one or to vilify one group over the other and to make the lesser wanted group seem disgusting. Stage 4 is organization. So the genocide is typically organized by the state and sometimes informally by terrorist groups. So this is like the establishment of the SS by the reign of Hitler. So this is when you start to train special army groups or organization groups that will potentially go out and do the genocidal killings. So this isn't the killing itself, that is later, but this is organizing state groups, military, militias, to prepare to go into the communities and start removing people for killing. Stage 5 is polarization. This is where extremists drive the groups apart. So this is increased hate propaganda and broadcasting. This is terrorism targeting moderates, intimidating people who are trying to speak out or trying to help those who are in danger. So prevention might be security and protection for moderate leaders, human rights groups, but polarization is really where it becomes unsafe, where anyone who's associated with a certain group becomes an enemy. And that enemy needs to be punished. They need to go to jail. They need to serve time. They need to do labor. They need to do all these other things. So so at each stage here, not something crazy visible is occurring. That's good to know too. So you might say that, the symbol, like the classification, symbolization, those are more visible when we start hearing those words. When we start getting into those propaganda pieces, those are visible. Whereas the dehumanization, you might say that kind of falls into that propaganda. The organization, that's more of like a behind the scenes training, recruiting, and the polarization too. It can feel like it just kind of gets lumped in, but it's very important to notice that at every single stage, once again, things can be stopped and slowed. That once you get to this level of the stages of genocide, genocide is not necessarily inevitable. It doesn't mean that the mental impacts haven't been there for it to be classified as a genocide. Because remember, it's more than just physical extermination, but it's also, altering of that mental state. And it's really important to know that, like I said, not everything is incredibly visible. It's not as distinctive, but very important to have interventions at any point. Okay, so identification is stage 6. Victims are identified and separated out because of their ethnic or religious identity. So this is where we would have people wearing those symbols, being forced to wear them. They're segregated into ghettos or forced into concentration camps. So identification is a transient stage. It's where people are literally being moved from their homes into places. Think about Hitler. Think about during Schindler's List, where the people are packing up their belongings and they are being registered in the books and they are moving into these ghettos where everyone is confined to one area and then later being moved to concentration camps. So that would be part of the identification where you're wearing the symbol, you're getting moved into the ghetto, you're getting moved into the concentration camp, and it's organized. Stage 7 is extermination. So this is where the mass killings become that genocide. It's extermination to the killers because they don't believe the victims to be fully human. Remember, they already did this dehumanizing thing. It's sponsored by the state. Armed forces often work with militias to do the killing. Sometimes genocides result in revenge killings by certain groups against each other, creating a downward, like whirlpool bilateral genocide where we have, like think about Rwanda, we have Tutsis having to rise up and kill Hutu people because, the Hutu people are killing the Tutsis at such a large rate. But then it becomes this like total warfare where each side is just going after each other, which is not good. But what happens here in the extermination is obviously we have, if you like, I keep referencing World War II because we've already talked about it this year, but this is where Hitler is ordering not just the extermination at the concentration camps, but the SS officers to go into the countryside and do those mass killings and push people into mass graves because the extermination wasn't happening fast enough. So this is the physical killing. And last, we have the denial stage. So this is the 8th stage that follows the genocide, where people who are part of the genocide, they try to cover up the evidence and intimidate witnesses, deny that it happened, blame what happened on the other victims. This is where they try to block investigations, so it's of the genocide. But this is where we have people who are sitting on trial and saying, well, I was forced to do it, or, all these other things. Whereas we know that there are militia members who are forced to do things, but high-ranking officers who are part of the plot and planning of certain things. Himmler, he can't be sitting at the stand saying that it wasn't part of his idea. So this is that denial, trying to cover up the evidence. And this is really typical in genocides. All right, I'm going to stop here. Part 2 is coming up.